Good morning and welcome to SCM 200. My name is Sudeep Ghosh and I am responsible for this course. I hope the next few weeks is going to be enjoyable for all of us. Let's talk about statistics and what is meant by statistics. Statistics is essentially the art and science of learning from data being facts or pieces of information. Statistics concern population. That is the overarching goal of statistics. When we talk about data, we talk about population, we collect samples from the population, and we try to make some sense about the characteristics of the population. Now, when it comes to businesses, business statistics is applicable to business world, and whatever decisions are made to improve in the fields of marketing, operations, finance, and human resources, to name a few. So population, the characteristics of population is captured by parameter. The characteristics of the sample is captured by sample statistic. The next question is, where do we find statistics? Suppose you are planning to buy a new car. Where do we look? We look at Kelly book, which has all the current prices, also the price of used or second-hand cars. We also look at JD Power and Associates. They collect all the information from the consumers, the people who bought brand new cars, or people, and based upon their experience, all the data has been collected. If somebody wants to buy a new TV, a good place to go would be Nielsen TV rating. The other thing we also have is internet click-throughs. And it's so simple to collect data nowadays. Simple, whenever you are on computer, you have all these ads come in, and with that ad, after a while you see this click-throughs, either you say yes or no, and you move on. So we collect information and transform this information into data. This data could be qualitative in nature or they could be quantitative in nature. And how do we interpret this data? The next thing we need to talk about is variables, or what is meant by a variable. Variable is basically a characteristic of an item or individual. For example, when you visit a doctor's office, they'll check your vital sign, they look for your height, weight, age, etc. Those are nothing but variable. So if you go to a doctor's office and they have 100 patients, they can take the weight and find out the average weight of 100 patients. They can find out the average height of 100 patients. They can find the average age of 100 patients. Things of similar nature. Now let's focus on data. Data is a very important part of statistics, and data is crucial to the understanding of statistics. What we do, data embodies raw information. It has a lot of information, but without any meaning yet. So what do? We selectively go and collect data and try to make more sense out of it that we do not already have, that we haven't gotten yet. So data is critical in understanding statistics. When we look at the data, it could be divided into two segments: primary data or secondary data. Primary data is when you go and collect the data. For example, you want to find out the life expectancy of people in Brazil. So you go visit Brazil and ask individuals on the street in Brasilia, in Rio de Janeiro, in other places, and find out. So that would be an example of primary data. Secondary data is you're using a secondary source, and there are certain advantages and disadvantages of using both primary and secondary data. Primary data is very costly, but it's very reliable. Secondary data is not as costly. And nowadays, with the advent of computer, you can almost download data, but it's not as reliable, and you need to be more careful is what kind of data what is the source of the data. In other way, we can also differentiate data in terms of qualitative data and quantitative data. Qualitative data is what is called categorical data. For example, what is the color of your hair is what we would call a qualitative data. On the other hand, what is your height would comprise of what is called a quantitative data. So quantitative data has to do with you'll be able to measure it, and you can use it and deploy statistical techniques and it's more powerful. However, qualitative data, we can standardize qualitative data into separate things, into groups and categories, and that's why it's called a categorical data, and make sense out of it as well. When we talk about qualitative data, we look at discrete variables and continuous variables. Now, what are discrete variables and what are continuous variables? Example of discrete variables are number of siblings, number of cars, shoe sizes, number of computers in your home. You cannot have number of people enrolled in the statistics course is an example of discrete variables. So they have fixed values and counting units, counting process. On the other hand, we have continuous variables which are smooth scale, and it's basically a continuous variable is a measuring process. One of them is a measuring process. For example, height, waiting time in a gas station, temperature, volume. Height can be anything from 5 feet to any small increment up to 6 feet or beyond. So in that sense, we have continuous variable. I think that being said, we are pretty much done with the first chapter, and we'll move on to the next chapter.